record this in case, some people couldn't come, that they'd like to show up, and just kind of get the information uh, that Mr. Maid will be sharing with us because it's really important, especially for some of you that are getting ready to graduate and everything. So, because Jessica's having some connection difficulties, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. I'm Sarah English. Most of you know me. I'm an assistant professor here at Winthrop University. And I am pleased that our guest, this is the third year in a row that he has been presenting this wonderful resume workshop. It's something that the students always request. A little about Seth. He is the Director of Membership and Communication at NASW North Carolina. He's a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill, their School of Social Work, and he has experience in program management, tech assistance, coalition building, evaluation, and messaging. So, all those good connecting things that make social workers tick, right? So, in addition to all of that, he supports the membership of NASW North Carolina. So, if you plan on practicing in North Carolina, Seth is really your kind of your ticket in to NASW North Carolina. He can tell you all about it. So I want to welcome you, Seth, to our little neck of the woods here at Winthrop. And I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Dr. English and Jessica, for the invitation. It's very kind. I'm always happy to chat with the folks from Winthrop. So let me go ahead and get my screen shared so that we can get things rolling there. All right. So again, my name is Seth Maid. I'm the Director of Membership and Communication for NASW North Carolina, and I'm going to be here for the next hour. We're really going to be focusing on building your social work resume. If we have a little bit of time towards the end of the presentation, we may have some opportunities to talk a little bit about cover letters or professional references or things like that. We'll really just kind of have to wait and see. I will say that I'm happy to send, I know that Dr. English is recording this. I'm also happy to send a copy of my PowerPoint to Dr. English to distribute amongst y'all so that you can have access to maybe some of those sections of the presentation that we may not have time for. At least you'll get the slides for it that way. So all of that being said, before we start talking about resumes, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about NASW since that's the main thing that they pay me for. But I am interested in getting a little bit of an idea of who's in the room. So if you could just in the chat box, let me know if you're a BSW or an MSW, and let me know what year you're graduating or like when you're graduating. So May 2024, May 2025, May 2026, maybe, just kind of let me, so I have a general idea of kind of where people are at who are here today. All right, so it looks like so far a bunch of MSWs graduating this year, one person next year, a BSW in December, some more MSWs this year and next year. Okay, so that is really helpful information. So let me go ahead and start chatting a little bit about NASW. So if you're not familiar with NASW, NASW is the National Association of Social Workers, which is the largest membership organization of professional social workers in. We have over 111,000 members across 55 chapters. Those of you who live in North Carolina may or are going to practice in North Carolina may decide to be members of NASW North Carolina. If you're living in South Carolina, there is an NASW South Carolina as well that you could be members of. You can see what we work to do to strengthen and unify the profession, promote the development of social work, and advance social justice and social welfare. We also oversee the code of ethics. So these are the ethical standards that you're going to be asked to uphold throughout your entire professional career. I'm assuming at this point in all of y'all's schooling, you are familiar with the code of ethics. Hopefully you have read it. They are always available on the NASW national website. So I'm not going to spend too long talking about NASW North Carolina, since a lot of you may live in South Carolina and it's not the most relevant thing in the world. But I did want to mention one thing in particular, and that's our virtual local program units. So these are groups of social workers Before the pandemic, they were arranged geographically around the state of North Carolina, and they would meet for continuing education and for networking. After COVID, they all moved online, and they actually all remain online. And that's an important thing because it means that folks are able to attend these local program unit webinars from no matter where they are, right? So you could be in South Carolina and attend our Raleigh, North Carolina local program unit meeting. These are really great opportunities for students, especially to learn more about social work practice areas and to begin building your professional network. Every single one of these virtual local program unit webinars are completely free for students to attend. Doesn't matter if you're a member of NASW, not a member of NASW, doesn't matter if you live in South Carolina or North Carolina, you can attend these for free. So I really strongly encourage you to go to the NASW North Carolina website, check out our calendar, and just bookmark it because we're constantly adding new local program unit webinars every month. If you are in North Carolina, member, you can take advantage of some of our career resources, including our job bank, personalized resume review, career consultation, licensure consultation. March is social work month. So I'm assuming all of you know this, and the month is almost over, but happy social work month regardless. You can go to the NSW North Carolina website and download a bunch of fun stuff like Zoom backgrounds, like the one that I have right now, and a bunch of other information about social work month. If you're just interested in staying connected with the NASW North Carolina chapter, even if you live in South Carolina, but you just want to kind of hear about what's going on here, we do have a listserv that you can sign up for. It's free. It's open to everybody. So I have a QR code on the screen. Feel free to join the listserv if that's something you're interested in. We send that information about student webinars, awards, other opportunities that we think students might want to know more about. Speaking of student webinars, we're going to have our final student webinar of the 2023-2024 school year in April, on April 22nd from 12 to 1. It's going to be how to be a social worker, professionalism in the social work workplace. This is completely free. It's open to everyone. If you're something you're interested in doing, you can go to the NSW North Carolina website and sign up today. If you are in North Carolina, you can apply for our Toby Brown Award for BSW students. This is for graduating BSW students. And if that's something that applies to you, you can go get a bunch more information. Applications are due on April 15th. So no matter where you are, whether it's North Carolina or South Carolina, the number one reason to join as a student is that it is so much cheaper if you join when you are a student. It is $60 if you join before you graduate. If you wait to the day after you graduate as an MSW, the price quadruples. So if it's something that you have been thinking about doing, it is really worth doing it before you graduate. If you join as a student, you can also qualify for up to 3 years of cheaper membership rates even after you graduate, but only if you join when you are a student. So that's a really important point. Okay. So I'm here today, like I said, to talk about building your social work resume. It's going to be the main thing that we talk about. A couple of things. Kind of most folks, it seems like, are graduating in about a month or so. So congratulations to all of you who are about to graduate. I think you will find, obviously, for those of you who are about to be looking for jobs, this is going to be a really helpful conversation about how to make sure you're ready for that in terms of getting your resume in order. But even for those of you who are a year away or a couple of months away, if you're graduating in December or next year, I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation as well. And I would like it to be a conversation. So I could just spend the next, 50 minutes or so reading my PowerPoint slides, but I would much rather answer the questions that you most want to know about. So I'm going to pause for questions quite a bit during this presentation. And if you have a question about anything that I've mentioned, that I have yet to mention, please feel free to ask it. You can either type it in the chat and I'll keep an eye on that, or you can unmute as well. That's more than okay as well. But please, please, please feel free to ask questions as we go along. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start diving into talking about resumes. So when we're thinking about resumes, the first thing we want to think about is what are hiring managers looking for? Obviously, the number one thing is they want to know what you can do for them. They want to see if you have a certain skill set, and that skill set is often defined in the job description of the job that you are applying to. Job descriptions are going to be your very best friend as you go through the application period. process. So we're going to look at a couple sample job descriptions in a little bit. We're going to talk about them a little bit more closely as well. So beyond that, they want to know that you have leadership experience. Even if the job you're applying for is not a supervisory role or a managerial role, folks still want to know that you can take charge of a situation, lead a project, lead a program, that you can stand out from the crowd. So anywhere that you have some leadership experience, it's a really valuable thing to include on your resume. Do you have experience with the client population or the issue that the organization is most concerned with? But even beyond that, do you have experience working with diverse people in diverse communities? We know that no person is one identity or one experience. We're all intersecting identities and experiences. And more organizations really want to see that you have experience working with a diverse group of people, because you're going to be working with a diverse group of people. So what it boils down to is, can you do the job? Will you do the job? And will you fit in? And that will you fit in is often where the interview comes in. Often by the time you get to the interview stage, hiring managers will have decided this person probably has the skills and experiences we're looking for. The interview is often to see, is this person going to fit into our organizational culture? Is this someone that we want to spend the next 40 hours a week with for the next however many years? We're not really going to talk about interviews today. I have a whole separate presentation about interviews, but if we have some time at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions about those as well. Okay, so here's a question for you. Folks can feel free to type a guess in the chat. How long do you think the average hiring manager looks at a resume before they decide if they're interested in a candidate? If you have a guess, please feel free to drop it in the chat. 20 seconds. All right, 30 seconds, less than 5 minutes. Now we've got a pretty good range going, everywhere from now 10 seconds to about 5 minutes. 1 minute, 15 seconds, 3 to 5 minutes, 30 seconds. Okay, so we got a pretty good range going right now. Everybody gives hiring managers a little bit too much credit. It is 6 seconds. 6 seconds. This is not a lot of time. This obviously does not mean that a hiring manager is looking through your entire resume, reading the entire thing in 6 seconds. That's not possible. It also doesn't mean that you have to be able to communicate everything about yourself to a hiring manager in 6 seconds. That's also not possible. What this means is, when a hiring manager is doing that initial pass through a stack of resumes, they are sorting through them very quickly into a no pile and into a pile they're going to look more closely at. And the way that they're doing that generally in those 6 seconds is they are looking for 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4 things that they know the person they hire has to have, skills or experiences that this person must have to be a fit for this position. And if they can't find those 2 or 3 or 4 things really quickly, there's a good chance you're going to end up in a no pile, even if those things are on your resume, but not easily findable. So one of the things we're going to talk a lot about tonight is how to identify the things that seem to be important in a job description and how to make sure you're including that on your resume. Let's start with some basics though. Your resume should be no longer than 2 pages. Sometimes folks are told your resume should be no longer than 1 page. It absolutely can be longer than 1 page. It should not be longer than 2 pages. There are just a couple of minor exceptions to this that most people will not encounter. One minor exception is if you are applying for like an academic position where you're submitting a CV, those tend to be longer. The other way this comes up is sometimes for some government jobs, they allow you to submit a longer resume as well. But those are pretty much it. Other than that, you want to really stick to the 2-page limit. This is going to sound really obvious, but people often forget to think about this. Make sure that your resume looks nice. Make sure it's easy to read and easy to find information. So this looks like a couple of different things. Number one, your formatting. Think about your fonts. You don't have to only use, Times New Roman or Calibri. You can use fonts that are a little bit different to make your resume stand out. The key thing here, though, is, of course, they still want to look professional. You don't want to use the Halloween font on your resume, but you can do things to kind of make your resume stand out. Think about your spacing, lines. Are you going to be bolding section headers? Are you going to be underlining things or italicizing things? All of that goes into this. One thing we've been seeing more and more folks do lately is use color on their resume. And it used to be that this was not recommended. The thinking on this has shifted though lately. And the thinking now is that if you're going to use color, it's okay, but you want to use it sparingly. So that means you're not using every color of the rainbow. Generally, you're picking one color and using it throughout your resume, and you're not having everything in that color, right? Or you're not having the entire background of your paper be bright blue or something, right? This is really about using it to highlight specific things. So maybe your name in your header, maybe your subject headers, things like that. You're wanting to really think about using it judiciously. So the one thing I will say when you're using color is that you want to be careful of what's known as ATSs, or automated tracking systems. So an automated tracking system is a computer program that some organizations use when they are reviewing resumes before a human being ever looks at them. So a computer program will scan them for specific words or phrases, and if they find them, you move on, and if they don't, you end up in the no pile. We're going to talk more about them in a little bit, but the reason why this is important in terms of using color on your resume is that some of these automated tracking systems cannot read color fonts. So if you think the job that you are applying for is going to be using one of these tracking systems, you should have everything on your resume be black. If you think that it's not, then you could play around a little bit with color. So this is not going to be a every time this is absolutely 100% true kind of rule, but generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is that if you are being asked to upload your resume or cover letter to a website, they are likely using a tracking system. If you are being asked to email it to a person, they are likely not using a tracking system. Again, I can't guarantee that will always work, but it in general is a pretty good rule of thumb. One thing we've been seeing folks do a lot lately is using online resume templates to build their resumes. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. The problem comes in with just the fact that a lot of people use them. So NASW North Carolina offers a personalized resume review service. I'm the person who does that. I see a lot of resumes, and probably 50% of the resumes I see look exactly the same because people have used these very similar online resume templates. If you kind of think through what that's going to look like for a hiring manager, if a hiring manager gets 50 resumes and 25 of them look exactly the same, and you're one of those 25, it's going to be that much harder for you to stand out. Again, it doesn't mean you can't use them. It's just something to think about. Think about the way your resume flows. You should be grouping similar sections together. So if you have an education section and then you have another section talking about stuff you did in school, like recognitions or honors or things like that, you want to group those sections together. You don't want to make people hunt for information on your resume. Be consistent. And this is one of those things that sounds more easy than it actually is, because a resume is generally not a document we write at once. It's a document we keep coming back to and adding new information. And it can be really easy not to look back or not to remember how we have written certain information. So, for example, are your dates right aligned in one section? Well, then they need to be right aligned in every section. Are you ending some of your bullet points with periods? Well, if so, you need to end all of your bullet points with periods. Those things sound small, but hiring managers absolutely do notice them. Please proofread your resume. I can't stress this enough. Sometimes people will rely on spell check, grammar check. It does not catch everything. Make sure that you proofread your resume every single time you send it. Avoid jargon. In social work, we have a ton of jargon. And if you're not familiar with what jargon means, it's basically words or phrases that are really specific to either social work or sometimes really specific to the type of social work you're doing or even the organization you're working in. You cannot assume that the person who reads your resume is even going to be a social worker. And if they are a social worker, they may not have worked in your practice area or may not know anything about your organization. So it's best to use really plain language that anybody could understand. Same thing with acronyms. We love acronyms in social work. If you're going to use an acronym on your resume, you need to spell it out the first time you use it. One thing I always recommend that folks do is after you have kind of a resume set, give it to someone in your life who is not a social worker. ask them to read through it, and ask them if they are confused by something or if they don't understand what something means. And if they point to anything, you should be rewording it, because you want anybody who reads it to be able to understand everything that you're talking about. Everything on your resume should be in reverse chronological order. So that means at the top goes what has ended the most recently or what you are currently doing. So if you're currently in an internship, that goes at the top. The job you ended most recent to that is what's underneath that, and so on. It's not by when it starts, it's by when it ends. More does not necessarily equal better. And this is a little counterintuitive to folks. Sometimes I'm sent resumes where someone will have like their internship listed, and then they will have 20 bullet points listed under that internship because they think that's going to make me look really impressive. I've done 20 different things. That's not how it looks to a hiring manager. Again, that hiring manager who is looking for like 3 specific things on your resume, if you have those 3 things, but they're buried under 17 other bullet points, there's a good chance they're going to be missed. So in general, you should be looking for 3 to 8 bullet points under every job or internship or work experience that you're including on your resume. This goes both ways, no more than 8. Also, no fewer than 3. Sometimes I'm sent resumes where people have 1 or even 0 bullet points under a job. You should be able to come up with at least 3 things you did at a job. And if you can't, you need to think seriously about whether you actually need to be including that on your resume. I keep talking about doing bullet points. They've done research on this, and they have found that when folks try to write their work experience in paragraph form, which sometimes people try to do, hiring managers don't read it. They will generally read the first sentence and then stop. So if you want hiring managers to kind of scan through your experience, make sure that you're writing in bullet points. I see there's a question in the chat. I'm going to stop for questions at the end of the slide, and I'll circle back and get that in just a second. Send your resume in cover letter as PDF files, not as Word documents. You don't know what version of Microsoft Word someone's going to have. If it's an older version or a different version than what you have, the formatting may look really weird when they open it up. I've also been seeing more and more folks try to send resumes and cover letters as Google Doc links. Do not do this. Google Doc links are often used in spamming or spoofing emails, and as a result, sometimes folks are very reluctant to try to open them. So you definitely don't want to do that. You want people to open your files. So send them as PDFs. Put your name in your file name. I can't tell you how often I've sent resumes that are called something like resume draft number 19 or resume summer 2023, right? It should be your first name, your last name, and then the name of the job you are applying for. So if I was applying for my own job, it would say Seth Maid, Director of Membership resume, Seth Maid, Director of Membership cover letter. You want to make it easy for folks to find your resume on their computer. And we're going to talk more about this in a little bit, but you want to also include accomplishments and metrics. Your resume should not just be about things you did, but things that you did well. And people often forget to include that. Like I said, we're going to talk more about that in just a little bit. Okay, so let me pause here for some questions. I know there was at least one in the chat. Let's see here.
I had the one in the chat.
Sure,
And I would just want to clarify what I mean by that.
sure.
So, we're doing resumes in my leadership class, and she told me to like be consistent with like 3 bullet points under each or 4 under each. Does that matter? Does consistency matter with?
I wouldn't be as worried about making sure you have the exact same number of bullet points under each job, because I think it's only natural that at some of your positions, you're probably going to have done things that are going to be a little bit more relevant or things that are a little bit more important to this job you're applying for. In some jobs, you may not have quite as much. So for me, the key thing is always, is it relevant to the job? If yes, include it. If it's not, it may not be necessary to include it. We're going to talk more about that in a slide or two, but that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't think that's that important now.
Thank
you. Yeah. Any other questions before I move on? All right, let's keep going then. Oh, something just popped in the chat. Would you recommend putting your picture on your resume? No, I would not. That is not a good idea of something to do. There are a couple of different reasons for that. The number one thing I would say is you're not applying for a job as as an actor or a model. You don't need to be doing that. But the larger problem behind that is that sometimes some organizations will not engage with anybody who puts their photo on their resume. The reason for that is that they don't want to be accused of acting in any sort of discriminatory way. If you put your picture on your resume, some people think, I'm not saying this is accurate, but some hiring managers think that they are opening themselves up to making decisions that they are worried about being based on, whatever kind of protected class that maybe somebody could ascertain from a photo. So I would not do that. You can link to your LinkedIn profile. That is absolutely something you could do. So if they really were interested and wanted to see more about you, they could click on it and see if they really wanted to, but I would not put that on your resume now. LaShonda, it looks like LaShonda has a question.
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I noticed that you stated to if we could stay away from like the templates to do so. What if you are an amateur like myself and don't know how to draft a resume without a template? Like, what is your suggestions for formatting?
Sure. So, and again, I don't think that it's necessarily that you absolutely can't use a template. It's just something to be aware of. But one thing that you could do, and I've seen people do this, I've helped people do this, you could put your stuff in a template and then make some changes to the template after all your stuff is in it. So maybe you load all your stuff in the template, it kind of gives you the final version, and then you change around the way the header looks, or you change around some of the fonts or something like that, just so that it doesn't look exactly the same. If you don't feel comfortable building a resume from scratch, you don't necessarily have to. You can just kind of make some tweaks to existing templates. So that's the first thing I would say you could do. The other thing that you could do, honestly, is just Google resume templates, and you don't have to necessarily put your information in all of them, but just see what the resumes look like, and then you could kind of just take, maybe you like something from one of them and something else from another one, and just kind of take bits and pieces from various resume templates. If you have a little bit more time, that's maybe a way to do it. Otherwise, plug your information into a template if you feel like that's the way you want to do it, and then just try to think about ways you can play around with it to make it look a little bit different. Any other questions? All right, let's keep moving. I will, again, stop in a little bit for more if you think of anything else. Also, feel free to kind of drop something in the chat if you think of something while I'm talking. All right. So again, I'm not sure if we're going to have a chance to talk about cover letters or not tonight. If I say nothing else about cover letters, though, I'm going to tell you this: never submit a generic cover letter to a job. You need to be writing a brand new cover letter for every job you're applying to. A lot of people know that, but a lot of people don't know that you should also not be sending the same resume to every job you're applying for. Most people have one resume, they send it everywhere. That is not helpful. And it's not helpful because every job you apply to is likely not going to be looking for the same exact set of skills and experiences. There may be some overlaps, but there's also likely to be some differences as well. So you need to be adjusting your resume based on the job description of every single job you are applying to. This does not mean that you have to start from scratch every time. What this means is that likely you're going to be making some small changes. You're going to be maybe taking something off your resume that's not relevant to this job, or putting something else in that is. Maybe you're reordering some of your bullet points so that something that was listed 4th or 5th is now listed 1st or 2nd because it seems more important. Maybe you're even rewording some things to better match the language of the job of the job description or of the organization. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that in a little bit, but I really encourage you to think about, like I said, in responding to that question a second ago, only including the things that are directly relevant to the job you're applying for. That's really what you want to be aiming for, the skills, the experiences that you can form some sort of a connection between what you've done and what you're applying for. There we go. So one thing you might want to consider is actually having two different work sections. This is something I often suggest for folks who are at the stage of their career where y'all are, which is about to graduate. And the reason why I suggest it is because often people at your stage of career don't have a ton of social work experience and maybe have a lot of non-social work experience. And so a common question that I get from folks is, how do I deal with that non-social work experience? You know, I'm in grad school, but I'm also working as a server. I don't want that server position to be the first thing somebody sees in my work experience. So what do I do about this? And the answer is having two separate work sections. The first one would be called social work experience. And social work experience would be filled with literally anything you've ever done in your entire life that is related to social work. Obviously, internships, also paid social work. A lot of volunteer experience is social work experience. I was doing a resume review for someone fairly recently who had worked as a volunteer on a sexual violence crisis line and did not have that anywhere on their resume. And that is absolutely social work experience and should be treated as such. So anything you've done related to social work goes in that social work experience section. The other work section you're going to have is going to be called something like other work experience. And that's where you're going to put all of those non-social worky jobs that you've had. So the thing that I'll say about this is at a certain point, your non-social worky jobs will fall off your resume. The reason you may want to include them now, because they're, again, like I said earlier, they're not going to be super relevant. So why are you including them? The main reason to include them now is if you don't have a lot of paid social work experience. Folks like to see some sort of paid work history on your resume. So it may be for right now, you're needing to have that other work experience section where you're listing some of those other jobs you've had so that you can show folks, I've been in a paid work environment before. But those are the things that are going to come off your resume within the first few years of you being a professional social worker, because you're going to have other paid work going on. Yes, I'm going to provide a copy of the slides to Dr. English, who can distribute it amongst y'all. So you will be getting this information. All right, let's talk a little bit about objective statements and professional summaries. An objective statement is something you often see on a resume. It usually goes near the very top. So it's usually your name, your contact information, and then objective statement. Usually they look like what's on your screen. Objective, recent graduate seeking position as a school social worker to work with children, and so on. You can read the rest. We actually recommend pretty strongly that you do not do this. The reason for this is that you are taking up really valuable space on your resume. It's one of the first things somebody's going to see, telling a hiring manager something they already know. They know you want a job as a school social worker because you're applying for a job as a school social worker. So why are you telling them this? Why are you taking up that space to do that? It's just not helpful. What can be helpful is what's called a professional summary. And a professional summary is about the same length. It's 1 to 3 sentences. It goes in the exact same space under your name and contact information. But instead of talking about what you want to do with your life, this talks about what skills and experience you would bring to the table if you were hired for this job. So what does this look like? Licensed clinical social worker with 6+ years experience in medical and clinical mental health, working with diverse populations in private practice, healthcare, outpatient, and inpatient treatment settings, recently relocated to state. So in 2 sentences, this person has told us they're licensed, they've been doing it for 6+ years, they've worked in medical and clinical mental health, and they've done it in private practice, healthcare, outpatient, and inpatient treatment settings. And then they've even told us why they're looking for a job, recently relocated to state. This is so much more helpful than if this person had said something like objective to get a job at a mental health facility. That doesn't tell a hiring manager anything. This tells a hiring manager just a ton about what this person is actually capable of. Now, this used to be the only professional summary that I would share with folks. And I would often get the question from social work students in particular that would always go something like, well, that's all well and good for somebody who's been working for 6 years. All I have is, I have like no social work experience. How do I build a professional summary that would be helpful? And my answer is always the same. You take the experiences that you do have and you try to match them to what the organization is looking for. So just because you've never had a paid social work job doesn't mean you don't have social work experience. So the next professional summary I'm going to show you is something that I helped a person build using 2 experiences. One, an internship they had as a school social worker, and 2, some volunteer experience they had working at a community LGBTQ center. So with just those 2 things, we were able to create this. Recently graduated social worker with knowledge in case management, intake, and program management and evaluation, experience working with diverse populations, including children, teenagers, in the LGBTQ community in a variety of settings, including middle and high schools and community nonprofits. There's a lot of skills and there's a lot of experience in that professional summary for somebody who has never had a paid social work job. So this is absolutely something that you can do. It may take a little bit of practice. This is a skill itself, learning how to write a professional summary. But once you get the hang of it, it is very helpful to a hiring manager in seeing very quickly what it is that you're bringing to the table. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay, let's keep moving then. Let's talk a little bit about keywords. And I've mentioned keywords a little bit already. When I was talking about those tracking systems and how they were looking for words or phrases in order to kind of move a resume on or put it in a no pile, they're basically looking for keywords. These are nouns, phrases that reflect skills and experiences that are sought by a potential employer. As contrary as it seems, your resume is not about you. It's about the person you're sending it to. They are looking for specific things. They need to be able to find those specific things. So you need to be able to identify keywords and think about how to integrate them into your resume. Where do you find keywords? You need to do a little bit of research. The number one best place to find keywords is the job description. We're going to look at a couple of sample job descriptions in just a second, where we can identify some things we might want to pull out of there. The employer website can be really helpful as well. Look at their mission statement, their vision statement. If they have programs, look at their program pages and see what words they're using to describe the work that they're doing. LinkedIn can be helpful here too. If you want to be a school social worker, go look up a bunch of school social workers on LinkedIn and see what words they're using to describe the work that they're doing. We talked about spelling out acronyms earlier. Well, another reason to spell out acronyms, other than just making your resume easier to understand, is acronyms often contain key words. And if you spell it out at least once, you'll know that it'll get past a computer program.
Hello?
Yes. Was there a question? No? Okay. So here's a sample job description. It is much shorter than the job descriptions you're likely to see when you are applying for jobs. Usually they're about a page or maybe even a little bit longer, bunch of bullet points on them. This one fits on a slide, so it fits our purposes for tonight. Even in this very short 1-paragraph job description, there are a bunch of keywords that you can pull out of here. What are some of those? Well, pretty much everything I've highlighted in red. So the first thing you're going to be looking for are specific skills that this job is looking for you to be able to do. So anywhere you see a specific skill and you have done that skill, you want to make sure you are including that in your resume. So here that would be psychosocial assessment, counseling, case management, call rotation. When I say you're going to be putting that on your resume, I mean you are putting those exact words on your resume. So you're going to say call rotation. You're not going to say that you were, were assigned crisis line duties, 2 nights a week. You're going to specifically say that you did call rotation, and then you can go into more detail about that. But you're going to use the language that they are looking for. So skills number 1. Also, who are the people that they are wanting you to serve? Here, it's 1, patients. So let's say the organization you work for right now for your internship calls the people you see clients. For this job, I would change clients to patients. It means the exact same thing. You're matching the language they're looking for. But even beyond that, families enrolled in hospice. If you haven't had any interaction working with folks enrolled in hospice, you better be saying you have worked with folks enrolled in hospice on your resume. But even if you haven't, even if you just worked with families, you still need to be indicating that you have worked with families on your resume. Because there is a specific dynamic that goes into working with families that folks will want to know that you have experienced. Even things like where a job is located, Moore and Montgomery County. If you worked in those counties, you should be saying so on your resume. Here is another job description. This one's a little bit longer, but I'm not going to spend as much time looking at this one. The main reason why I'm showing you this one is to show you that in a job description, things are often repeated. And if something is repeated in a job description, it is probably important. You want to think about how to include that in your resume. Okay. Let's talk about bullet points. Bullet points are the number 1 issue that I see on the resumes that I review. And when I say the number 1 issue, I mean it is the problem of probably 97% of all the resumes that I see. The problem is always exactly the same. People are not nearly specific or descriptive enough in describing the work that they have done. So, here are some examples of common things I see on resumes that are not descriptive sentences. Provide psychotherapy to clients, conduct assessments, provide case management, work on multidisciplinary team. These last 2, I've highlighted them in red because these are specific things that I often see on student resumes. Attended meetings. Attending a meeting is not a skill. It is also not an experience that is so unique it is going to set you apart from any other person. Did you do something at a meeting? Did you provide agency updates? Did you give a presentation? That may be something that is worthwhile putting on your resume. But saying that you sat in a room while a meeting happened around you is not. And then this last one, assisted with intake. I've noticed that social work students in particular tend to use very passive verbs to describe the work that they have done in their internship. And by passive verbs, I mean things like assisted with, helped with, observed, participated in. Those verbs are not helpful because they do not actually tell a hiring manager what it is that you did. If you tell me that you assisted with intake, it could mean a million different things. It could mean that you started your internship watching someone do intakes. Gradually, as the year went on, you took on more and more responsibility. And by the end of your internship, you were doing intakes all by yourself. You were referring people all around your organization. You were doing all sorts of things. It could mean that. Or it could mean you spent the entire year handing someone a form. I have no idea. And I will not know unless you tell me. So you need to use really specific words to describe what it is you did when you walked through the door of your agency for your internship or when you signed on to Zoom if it was a virtual internship. Sometimes social work students think, well, it was an internship, I was being trained, or my supervisor was right there, so I don't want to take ownership or credit for this work. But if you did the work, you did the work, and you should take ownership over the things that you did. Everybody has help. Everybody gets started, right? So just because your supervisor was sitting next to you when you were doing the thing doesn't mean you weren't doing the thing. Take ownership over the things you did. So one way to think about writing your bullet points is to use what's called a PAR story. And PAR stands for problem, action, result. Basically, what problem did you solve? What did you do to solve it? And then how were things better than before? So let's take a look at how a more descriptive bullet point might play out in practice. So instead of saying provide psychotherapy to clients, again, that's one of those ones that I said was not a particularly helpful bullet point. You may say something more like this. Provide group and individual outpatient therapy to adult clients at a substance use treatment center utilizing CBT, DBT, and motivational interviewing with the goal of setting steps toward recovery. This is so much more helpful to a hiring manager than if you had just said provide psychotherapy to clients. Now, all of a sudden, they know you have done group and individual therapy, that it was outpatient therapy, that it was to adult clients at a substance use treatment center, that you've done CBD, DBT, motivational interviewing, and that you were doing it to set steps toward recovery. If this person is thinking, oh, we see adult clients at a substance use treatment center, they have experience doing exactly that. We do outpatient therapy. We're looking for someone to do a DBT group. Anything like that. They now know that you are a good match for that. They will not know that unless you tell them. Okay, I have a few more slides, maybe 5 or 6 more slides. I'm going to get through it. We're about 13 minutes away from the end of our hour, but I'm going to get through these slides and then I will stop for questions for a final time. I mentioned earlier you want to include not only things you did, but things that you did well. It's really important to quantify how you were an asset to the organization. It's going to sound really obvious when I say it, but people want to hire people who seem like they're good at their jobs. And including accomplishments is a way to demonstrate that you were good at your job. When you're thinking about what you've accomplished, you can ask yourself some of these questions. This is not an all-encompassing list. Obviously, there's other things you can ask yourself. I do want you to pay special attention to number 5, where you ask to do a special project. Interns are asked to do special projects all the time. It's like the number one thing interns are asked. Please do this thing that no one has ever had time for that we would love for somebody to be able to do. That's a special project. So make sure you're talking about those sorts of things on your resume. Anywhere you can quantify things is really helpful. So instead of just saying facilitated presentation to community partners, maybe you would say something like this. Facilitated domestic violence 101 presentation, again, being more specific about what it is you're talking about, to 25 community partners, quantifying things. And because presentations often have an evaluation component with them, maybe you have access to this kind of information, of whom 96% reported an increase in knowledge on a post-test. You absolutely can put evaluation data on your resume. If I'm a hiring manager and I'm seeing this and I think, wow, 96% of people learned something from this presentation, I'm thinking this person's probably pretty good at giving this presentation. So this is an opportunity for you to toot your own horn on your resume. So here's another thing, updated agency forms. I see this bullet point on a lot of folks. I guess this is something a lot of folks do at their internships. I never had to do it when I was a social work intern, but a lot of folks evidently do. Even something like this, which is probably a pretty boring and or mundane task, can turn into an accomplishment if you think about it the right way and if you phrase it the right way. So maybe you write your bullet point about this like this. Updated 5 agency forms, again, quantifying things, including client information, informed consent, and emergency contact information, being more descriptive, to include more gender and relationship options in order to better serve the LGBTQ community. You have just taken what was probably a pretty boring task for you to do and turned it into something that, because you did it, your organization is better equipped to serve the community. That is absolutely an accomplishment, and it should be treated as such. Okay. So I mentioned earlier having that other work experience section for your non-social work jobs. And so sometimes I get asked, how should I write bullet points for those non-social work experience positions? And so there's a couple of different things to think about. For, if you have a server job or a retail job, there's likely going to be a couple of bullet points you're going to have in there that is not going to be directly related to social work. That's just the way it is. It's a big part of your job. You should probably be including it. However, you can also include some bullet points that are shaped to be more social work oriented by emphasizing what are known as soft skills, not hard skills. Hard skills are really specific things related to social work or the job you're applying for. Hard skills would be things like the ability to do cognitive behavioral therapy, doing outpatient therapy, case management, working with teenagers. Those are really specific things, right? Soft skills are those sorts of things that you have maybe picked up at jobs and that would be helpful for you no matter what kind of job that you are doing, including social work. So here are some examples. These are a little bit more general than what you would probably actually write on your resume, but here are some examples of some of those soft skills. Cultivated interpersonal communication skills. Communication skills are a soft skill. While serving diverse clientele, we had talked about how they want to see that you've worked with diverse groups of individuals in a fast-paced restaurant environment. Many social work agencies are very fast-paced. So that's another skill that you can demonstrate through a non-social work job. Demonstrated empathy and active listening skills. 100% social workers need those things by accurately gauging customer needs and preferences and showcasing an understanding of individualized attention. So these non-social work jobs can be an opportunity for you to really kind of get at some of these more general skills that are still going to be helpful for you to have. All right. Let's talk about a few things not to do. Do not put salary negotiable on your resume. What that does is it immediately devalues you in the eyes of the hiring manager. If they have a hiring range of $40,000 to $50,000 and they see salary negotiable on your resume, they are not going to think I need to pay this person $50,000. They're thinking this person's already telling me they're willing to negotiate. I can probably get away with paying them 40 or 41. You do not need to have references available upon request on your resume. People know you have references. When they want them, they will ask for them. They should be provided as a completely separate document from your resume. Some of this, I admit, is completely personal bias on my part, but I hate skill sections. And the reason for that is that they are often filled with things that are way too general to be helpful. So a skill section filled with things like hard worker, team player, good communicator, a lot of those soft skills that we just talked about are not helpful. It is not good communication skills to just tell me in a skill section that you're a good communicator, because it doesn't give me any context or idea of how you have demonstrated good communication skills. It is so much more helpful for you to talk about the skills that you have as bullet points under the jobs where you have demonstrated those skills. Even if it's something like here in a non-social work related job where you have demonstrated good communication skills serving a diverse clientele in a fast-paced restaurant environment. That at least gives me some context to what you're talking about. You just having a skill section where you say I'm a good communicator does not. Similarly, you do not have to have a skill section that is filled with things like proficient in Microsoft Word. The year is 2024. People are going to assume that you have some baseline technological knowledge, and that includes things like Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. That includes email programs. That includes using the internet. Things like that are things that they are going to assume that you know how to do. If in the job description they're like, we need somebody to use Microsoft Excel to build client databases or whatever, and you've used Excel in a workplace environment, again, write about it as a bullet point at the job where you used it instead of just saying, I'm proficient in Excel. Don't forget on your resume that your degree when you graduate will be a Master of Social Work or a Bachelor of Social Work. It is not a Master in Social Work or a Bachelor in Social Work. It is not a Master's of Social Work or a Bachelor's of Social Work. Master of, Bachelor of. We talked about including volunteer and internship experience on your resume. You can link to things if you want. I talked about linking to your LinkedIn profile, but if there's something else that you want people to see, go ahead and link to it. And when I say link to it, put it as a hyperlink in the document so that people just have to click on it. If you're a member of NASW or any other professional affiliations or associations, mention that on your resume. Organizations that hire a lot of social workers like to see that the folks that they're hiring are members of their chosen profession's professional association. And lastly, don't forget to include who your clients were. Be specific. Don't just say clients. You want to say, teenagers, LGBTQ individuals, people living with a mental illness. And while we're talking about it, it's people living with mental illness, not mentally ill people. You want to use person first, person centered language. If you are not sure what the correct terminology is to describe a population, and maybe you're not, language can change really fast sometimes, Google it. At the very least, go to the organization's website, see what language that they use to describe the population, and then mirror that back on your resume. There are few faster ways to end up in a no pile than to use outdated and potentially offensive language to describe a population. Make sure that you're including city and state for every single job that you've worked and that where your university is. Sometimes people leave that off because they think, oh, it's so obvious. Everybody knows where this thing is. Put it anyway, city and state. Your employment dates need to be listed. It is month and year to month and year, or if you're currently doing something, month and year to present. Please do not use the seasons to mark the passage of time on your resume. That means don't say that you work somewhere from summer 2020 to fall 2022, month and year to month and year. Make sure to include the name of your job title and the name of your organization for each job. You'd be surprised. Sometimes people leave those things off. And then finally, like I said earlier, please, please, please proofread your resume. You will miss things. And so it's really important that you go through it each and every time. Okay, we have just a couple of minutes left. So I will stop here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and stop for questions. So if folks have any questions about resumes or anything I wasn't really able to get to, again, you're going to get copies of these slides, which will have sections on cover letters, will have sections on professional references. So you will get that information, but I'll see if anyone has any last questions.
Thank you, Seth. Maid.
No problem. I'm happy to be here.
It was very refreshing and it was very knowledgeable. I have to say, you know, being in the field and knowing that things have progressed, it's good to be relevant. So thank you for making us relevant.
Yeah.
You are very welcome. I'm glad that you found it helpful.
I really want to share too with the students that I think the resume is such a good tool, especially it's really easy sometimes with applying and it's just a weird situation. Sometimes you don't hear from people. You don't even hear if you didn't get the job, and that's so frustrating. And it can be really disheartening when you first start going out there if you're not getting, the answers as quickly or as fully as you would like. And I invite all of you that when you get your resume done, to take it out every once in a while and look at it and see how much you've really accomplished, how much you've really done. And I think the resume is a great self-care tool, right? Just to remind you of all the wonderful things that you've done and you've accomplished. Uh, Sometimes when I'm feeling down, I'll look at my resume. And I would really encourage all of you to do the same thing too, because you've done a lot of really good work.
I think that's a great point. And I also want to kind of echo what you said kind of at the beginning of your comment, Dr. English, which is that, it can be really discouraging when you are searching for a job because it sometimes does feel like you're just sending all this information out into the void and not hearing back. And it's hard not to take that personally. And so one of the trickiest things to do, but one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is try your best not to take it personally, because often it is not actually about you. You never know what is happening at the organization where you are sending a resume and cover letter to. They could have an internal candidate that they wanted to hire, but they have to post it externally for agency reasons or whatever. There could be a million things going on. It is likely not a you are the problem issue. It is likely that there are just other stuff going on. And so do your best to just keep your attitude as positive as you can. I know that that's difficult when you're looking for a job, but all of you who are on the Zoom right now will get social work jobs. I promise you it will happen. It may not be your dream job. It may not be the job you want to do for the next 40 years. That's okay. Most people don't get their dream job directly out of social work school. Most people take a job that is going to help them for the next couple of years build some more skills and experiences that will get them to the next point in their career. So just kind of try to think about it as, what can I do to get through the next couple of years, get some more skills, and then get to that next point. All right. Any last thoughts, comments, anything else?
One more thing, you may have already covered it, but as far as this licensing thing is concerned, you can say in process or on the resume.
Yeah, so if you're going to be licensed, you can have a licensure section on your resume. Usually people put that near their education section. For right now, because you can't get licensed until you've graduated, you would have, licensure, you would have the name of the license. So in North Carolina, that's licensed clinical social worker. I'm not 100% sure what that is in South Carolina. So it's licensed clinical social worker associate in North Carolina. And then you could put in process, but it's not really in process. So that's not how I would, because it's not in process. So you've graduated. So what I would probably just say is expected June 2024 or whatever, right? And even if you don't meet that perfectly, the point here is that you are acknowledging to a hiring manager, this is on your radar. As soon as you graduate, you're going to work towards it, basically. And that's the important thing.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. All right. Well, I'll just close by saying thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here with y'all tonight. Dr. English, I am notoriously bad about getting copies of PowerPoints to folks after I promise them. So if you don't hear from me by like Wednesday, just give me a little nudge or something and I'll send it to you.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you again, Seth. It's a wonderful gift that you give us for Social Work Month, and we are so grateful to you. I love just listening to your advice for the students and for all of us too. So thank you so much, and thank you all for attending. I promise you, I will nag Seth about the PowerPoints, and I will get them all to you too.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. I will see you all later.